Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi vanished after entering the country's embassy in Turkey. Where is he? What's been done to find him? The Saudi Arabian journalist hasn't been seen since he entered that embassy on October the 2nd. And this is what we do know, that he went to the embassy to get the paperwork needed to marry his fiancée. He was never seen again. 15 men flew from Saudi Arabia. They were seen entering the embassy. And previous to this, US intelligence showed that the Saudi government wanted him back in the country. At least 15 Saudi journalists and bloggers have been arrested over the past year. Joining me is Afro-Middle East Centre's Jane Dutton to talk more about this. Scary story, right? What do you think happened?
Well, I think over the past 9 days, there's been sufficient that has come out to very strongly suggest that he was killed.
Yeah.
As has been alleged, he was killed, his body was dismembered, chopped up and disposed of somehow, somewhere, most likely in Istanbul. That's the story from Turkish intelligence, that's the story that the Americans are saying, that's the story that President Trump said in a media conference earlier.
Correct, because also the US intelligence beforehand showed that they could pick up that Saudi officials were talking about getting him back. What was it that frightened them so much about him? Obviously, he was a critic of Mohammed bin Salman, but there are others out there.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question because Jamal, he was a critic, but he wasn't a dissident.
No.
I mean, he firmly supported the Saudi regime, the Saudi system, if you like. He felt that there needed to be some change, but he wasn't a radical by any stretch of the imagination. One of the things that I kind of thought he was very soft on. So one would think, why did he seemingly pose such a big threat? But if you look back at the past couple of years that Mohammed bin Salman has effectively been running the country, even though his father is the king, he has arrested dozens of religious scholars, business people, members of the royal family, who seemingly pose no threat to him. But in some of those cases, it was just to shut voices down. In some cases,
remember when he rounded family members, businessmen, put them in the Ritz Hotel, fleeced them, got them to pay a lot of money back, which is also linked to the extreme corruption in the country.
Yeah. So effectively, you know, the way that the Saudi system ran up to that point was that different branches of the very large Saudi family had control over different sections of the state. So the National Guard was run, you know, and previously, the previous generation, by a particular branch of the family, the intelligence services by a particular branch. What he did in the space of a few weeks was that he centralized all that power in his office, in himself. So he took over the National Guard, the intelligence services, the army, much of the business interests by people like Walid bin Talal, one of the richest men in the country, no longer the richest, one of the richest men in the country. Took over most of the media institutions that Saudis had outside of the country.
And what's extraordinary is that he's trying to present himself as the man who's opening up the country. Women are now allowed to drive, and at the same time he's throwing more journalists in jail. So it really is a sort of more of a PR campaign that's happening at the moment, isn't it?
Very much so. I mean, apart from journalists, many of those women who have been asking to be allowed to drive
also
are sitting in jail. So it's a PR campaign. It's a way in which he wants to impress certain people, particularly in the West and particularly in the United States, impress them as a reformer and that kind of thing in order to get the support.
And they were buying it in the United States.
And they're buying it. I mean, this is the kind of ridiculous thing.
And also what's interesting about this, and sorry, we've got a little time, so I'm going to skip through all the points, is that, again, Qatar is blamed. Their new arch enemy, Qatar, and it's all got to do with the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, so they're blaming Qatar and just saying that Qatar is behind the disappearance of this journalist. How is that going to play out in the blockade that we're seeing at the moment? How much more tense can it get?
I don't think it's going to make the blockade itself much more tense. But what it's going to do is harden the alliance of Qatar and Turkey.
And Iran.
And Iran, kind of, they're on the side. The other two might not want to admit that they're in an alliance with Iran, but it'll strengthen that alliance, because particularly with this incident, Turkey is directly implicated, and there's a chance that over the next few days diplomatic relations might break down. And Qatar is being attacked, although it has nothing to do with this. Even his fiancée, who incidentally met him at a conference that we organized, our center organized in Istanbul a few months ago, his fiancée is now being said to be basically a Qatar kind of agent, if you like. So all kinds of these things. It's going to push Qatar further into a place where that alliance with Turkey strengthens and draws more firmly the line between those two countries and Iran on the side, as I said.
So it really backfired, wasn't it, this blockade, obviously? And it came at a time where, I mean, they were able to woo Trump to turn against Qatar, even though there are 13,000 US troops there. Is this in a way to deflect of the horrors committed in Yemen?
I don't think it's a way to deflect from that. I think what it is, however, is another horrendous botch-up. You know, Yemen, I mean, I hesitate to call it a botch-up when, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are being killed and the starvation, etc. But you had that, you had all of the arrests of people, you had the Qatari blockade, and now you had this. I mean, I was listening on some channel to a CIA person, former CIA person, who was saying, you know, for intelligence people to carry out an operation like this is just, it's unimaginable. So So either it is, either they know. I'm thinking back to the interview you did earlier. Either they didn't know at all what they were doing, or they didn't care. Because they thought that they can get away with it, like they getting away with everything else.
But they do get away with it. I mean, the US might. Whatever Donald Trump said about being outraged about it, he doesn't like it at all, but he's not going to do anything because they're such strong allies.
The strange thing, Jane, is that, you know, you can get tens of thousands of Yemenis being killed and they will get away with it. But one journalist kind of sparks something. And I think that the response we're seeing from the Americans, I mean, right-wing Republican senators who are saying that we must stop arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Perhaps that won't happen, but I think that it's raising a particular kind of attitude about the current Saudi regime in the United States. You know, they won't get away with it in terms of their relationships in the region. I think that this will strengthen Turkey's, and Qatar of course, but Turkey's resolve to change things in the region. And I think that this is a spark that is going to make things a bit different.
Jenna, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's our show for tonight. News is next.